Before dinosaurs ruled the land, even before megalodons spread nightmares beneath the ocean, Earth already had a predator far more ancient. It did not have teeth like a shark, it had no claws, and it did not need a gigantic elongated body to be terrifying. Its weapon was its bony jaws, sharp as blades, capable of snapping shut like an underwater guillotine. Its name was Dunkleosteus, the armored fish that once swam through the Devonian oceans about 380 million years ago. At that time, birds had not yet appeared, mammals had not yet appeared, and dinosaurs were still a story of the very distant future. But beneath the dark waters of the ancient seas, the battle for survival had already begun with the first predators in the history of vertebrate animals. And in that brutal world, Dunkleosteus was not just a fish. It was a living tank, an armored head, a deathly jaw, and the nightmare of the ocean before the age of dinosaurs. To understand why Dunkleosteus was so terrifying, we have to travel back in time to the Devonian period, about 380 million years ago. This was the era often called the Age of Fishes, when the ocean became the main stage of the evolutionary race. On land, life was still experimenting with its first steps, with primitive plants, early insects, and the first vertebrate animals beginning to leave the water. But beneath the sea, everything had become far more complex. Armored fish, ancient cartilaginous fish, mollusks, and countless strange marine creatures coexisted in a world full of competition. There, the slower could become prey, and the weaker could disappear without a trace. And it was in that harsh ocean that Dunkleosteus emerged as one of the first apex predators in history. It did not merely live in the Devonian seas. It was a symbol of the moment when the ocean began to create true monsters. Dunkleosteus is often mistakenly thought of as a kind of ancient shark, but the truth is completely different. It belonged to an extinct group of fish called placoderms, or armored fish. More specifically, Dunkleosteus was an arthrodire, a group of armored fish whose head and front body were connected by a flexible joint. This very structure allowed it to open its mouth wide and turn its armored head into a terrifying hunting weapon. Unlike sharks, Dunkleosteus did not have rows of teeth that were constantly replaced. Instead, the edges of its jaw bones developed into sharp cutting plates, working more like shears than ordinary teeth. When you look at its fossil skull, you see a creature that looks both like a fish and like an ancient war machine. It was not an agile killer like a modern shark. Dunkleosteus was a different kind of monster, heavier, more armored, and far more primitive. For many years, Dunkleosteus was often described as a sea monster reaching up to 8, or even 10 meters in length. Older images made it look like a giant armored shark, large enough to swallow everything in its path. But science does not stand still, and that image is now being reconsidered. The problem is that Dunkleosteus fossils mainly preserve the head and front armor, while the rear part of the body remains almost a mystery. When researchers used new measurement methods, the results became far more surprising. Instead of being 10 meters long, typical adult individuals may have been only a little over 3 meters. The extremely large ones may have reached around 4 meters, perhaps slightly more, but the oversized estimates are no longer certain. This does not make Dunkleosteus any less terrifying. It simply turns it from a giant shark into a short, heavy, thick, and powerful tank in the Devonian Ocean. What made Dunkleosteus so different was not only its jaws, but also its armored head, like a fortress. Its head and the front half of its body were covered with large bony plates, forming a strong natural armor. Seen from the front, Dunkleosteus looked like a creature assembled from stone, bone, and the steel of prehistory. Some parts of the armor, especially around the back of the head, may have been very thick and solid. However, not its entire body was covered in thick armor, as many people often imagine. The armor in other areas may have been thinner, while the rear part of the body is almost never fully preserved in fossils. That is exactly why the true shape of Dunkleosteus still remains a mystery. But the fossilized head alone is enough to show that this was no ordinary fish. It was a swimming fortress, carrying a deadly jaw through the Devonian Ocean. For many years, the bite of Dunkleosteus was regarded as one of the most terrifying weapons of the ancient seas. Some models suggested that it could open its jaws extremely quickly, in just a brief moment before its prey had time to react. When the two bony jaw plates snapped shut, they did not grind like molars, but sliced like two opposing blades. That image earned Dunkleosteus the name of the living guillotine of the Devonian. But today, scientists are more cautious with claims that sound too certain. Did it truly generate powerful suction like some modern fish? Does the bite force once estimated for it need to be recalculated based on a more accurate skull structure? These debates do not make Dunkleosteus any less terrifying. They only make it more fascinating, not a simple legend, but a predatory mystery still being decoded. As an apex predator, Dunkleosteus did not live on tiny prey drifting through the water. Its menu may have included ancient fish, early cartilaginous fish, shelled animals, and even other armored fish. In the Devonian world, where many creatures carried hard protective coverings, Dunkleosteus had a terrifying advantage. Its sharp bony jaws may have helped it bite, slice, and process prey that was far harder to swallow than ordinary fish. Fossils also show masses of fish bones that were crushed, partially digested, and may have been vomited out instead of being fully digested. This suggests that Dunkleosteus did not simply swallow its prey whole. It may have torn prey into pieces, taken the soft flesh, and then discarded the hard-to-digest bone fragments. Some fossil traces have even led researchers to consider the possibility that they attacked their own kind. In the Devonian Ocean, Dunkleosteus did not merely hunt. It was the fear at the very top of the food chain. With its heavy armored head, Dunkleosteus is often imagined as a slow, sluggish creature drifting along the seafloor. But that image may not be entirely accurate. Dunkleosteus lived in open waters, where speed and efficient movement could determine survival. If it hunted fast-moving fish, it could not have been merely a block of armor floating in the water. Some evidence suggests that its body may have been better adapted for powerful swimming than previously thought. Its rigid front body, large muscles, and tail may have worked together to create short but dangerous bursts of acceleration. It may not have been able to swim continuously at high speed like modern tuna or sharks. But when it needed to close in on its prey, Dunkleosteus could become a sudden charge from the darkness. And sometimes, in the Devonian Ocean, a single burst of speed was enough to end the hunt. What makes Dunkleosteus both famous and mysterious is that we do not have a complete body of it. The fossils most commonly found are the skull and the armor covering the front half of its body. As for the rear body, fins, tail, and overall shape, they remain major questions for paleontologists. Because of this, many past reconstructions of Dunkleosteus had to rely on its close relatives. But simply changing the way we infer the rear part of the body can change the entire image of the animal. Was it long and slender like a shark, or shorter, deeper-bodied, and more powerful? Was it a fast-charging predator of the open sea, or did it specialize in closing in with short bursts of acceleration? Each new study does not close the mystery, but opens a more accurate version of Dunkleosteus. And perhaps that is why this creature is so fascinating. It is not only a prehistoric monster, but also a scientific puzzle that has not yet been fully The modern story of Dunkleosteus began not on the seafloor, but on the cliffs along Lake Erie in Ohio. In 1867, J. Terrell, a hotel owner and amateur fossil collector, discovered strange bone fragments there. Those fossils were later sent to scientists, opening the journey toward identifying one of the most famous fish of the Devonian period. At first, these specimens were placed in a different group, before Dunkleosteus was eventually recognized as a separate genus. The most famous species name, Dunkleosteus terrelli, was given in honor of J. Terrell himself. The genus name Dunkleosteus, meanwhile, was created to commemorate David Dunkel, a paleontologist closely associated with the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Today, Cleveland holds one of the most important Dunkleosteus collections in the world. The armored skulls displayed there are not just fossils. They are the remains of a predator that once dominated the oceans hundreds of millions of years ago. Although it had once been a terrifying predator of the Devonian seas, Dunkleosteus ultimately could not escape the fate of extinction. At the end of the Devonian period, Earth went through a series of serious environmental changes, especially in the oceans. Many marine regions may have fallen into low oxygen conditions, leaving countless sea creatures without suitable places to live. As the environment changed, the food chain also began to shake. The prey that Dunkleosteus depended on may have declined, disappeared, or been replaced by other groups of organisms. For a large predator standing at the top of the ecosystem, collapse from below was a deadly threat. It could win a hunt, but it could not win against the transformation of an entire planet. And as the Devonian Ocean entered crisis, the age of Dunkleosteus also came to an end. The armored machine that once ruled the ancient seas vanished, leaving behind fossilized skulls as a reminder of a lost world. Dunkleosteus may not have been the longest fish, and it may no longer be certain that it was the 10-meter monster once shown in many older reconstructions. But that does not make it small in the history of evolution. It represents a very early moment when the ocean began to create predators with jaws, armor, and clear attack strategies. Without teeth like a shark, Dunkleosteus used its own bones to turn its mouth into a weapon. Without a roar, without claws, there was only an armored head charging out from the darkness. Before T. rex, before Mosasaurus, before Megalodon, the ocean once had a fear named Dunkleosteus. Today, it remains only in stone, in museums, and in the questions that science is still continuing to decode. But every time we look at that skull, it is as if we see an ancient world again, where life was both strange and brutal. And if you want to continue exploring the creatures that have vanished from Earth, follow us on our next journey.